Well, thank you all very much for agreeing to participate today. So just a little bit of background. Again, I'm the Innovation Fund Director at NTIA, and we issued what we called our first notice of funding. So our first opportunity to get a bite at some of that $1.5 billion a little bit over a year ago today. So early April last year, we put out a request to have industry put forward test and evaluation laboratories as well as research and development methodologies to better address some of the challenges with Open RAN. So the idea of having a couple of fairly large dollar T&E laboratory awards and then another set of somewhat smaller dollar value research and development efforts to look at developing methodologies that could potentially be open source or implemented into some of the laboratories that we're standing up to validate things like security, look at things such as automation and interoperability. So we set aside $140 million for this first notice of funding, and we were able to make 3 large test and evaluation awards, one to AT&T and Verizon. We've got one with Dish and one with VIAVI. So we've got reps from those laboratories here today to talk about what they're doing and 2 of the R&D efforts as well. So to highlight a little bit of the research and development efforts that are hard at work at Northeastern and at Virginia Tech. So, you know, big picture, why we went out with T&E Laboratories for our first NOFO. It was largely a response to industry's needs. So NTIA put out a request for comments or a call to industry even longer than a year ago, about 18 months ago, to say, what are the challenges that you're experiencing industry in terms of Open RAN, and how could the Innovation Fund dollars be leveraged to address that? So test and evaluation was one of those points that was really bubbled up to be apparent, and I think it lended itself well to being the first funding opportunity that we put out there. The idea that test and evaluation and standing up those resources sort of as our first act made the most sense, being that it would be a resource sort of as we developed and we continued executing the overall program. So really wanted to highlight what they're doing and the resources that they can be to each and every one of you. So before I get started, or before I ask you guys to dig in, could you each introduce yourselves and let us know where you're from?
Sure. This is Michele Polese. I'm a research assistant professor at Northeastern. I've been working at the Institute for the Wireless Internet of Things for the last 4 years, so primarily on Open RAN related topics.
My name is Lingjia Liu. You can think about Ninja with L. So I'm currently a professor in EC department at Virginia Tech, and I'm also director of wireless at Virginia Tech. Our center has been working in the field of wireless for more than 20 years. It's great to be here.
You just heard from me.
You want to do it again? Yeah. Hi, thank you, Amanda, for this invite, and really glad to be here. My name is Ravinder Jarral. I'm with network development team within Dish Wireless, and also responsible for Orchid.
So, hey, my name is Stancu. I am with Highstreet Technologies, and I'm part of the Accord project, and also I am leading the simulations project inside the ORAN software community.
Great, well, thank you guys. So, Ravinder, why don't I let you go ahead and give the first overview of the Dish Laboratory, what you are standing up as part of your research or your T&E laboratory, and how you see industry playing and leveraging the resource you're standing up.
Great. I will start off with first saying on the ORAN myths. ORAN is pretty real. You know, we actually have devices which actually are running on our network today. So performance, if somebody really wants to go ahead and actually test that out, go out and actually buy a Boost. Don't have a plug-in for that. But what we actually have done is we really trust in what we actually can deliver and benefit from ORAN. And that's the reason we actually were working very closely with NTIA team to enable this test and validation ecosystem, which is going to be a lab which will be set up in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I know Chicago is called the Windy City, but if you go to Cheyenne, you will change your mind, okay? But in addition to the lab, there was a request for that, can we go out and actually test it in the field? So as part of our ecosystem, we're going to go out and actually have a lab ecosystem, and then we also actually have field sites where anybody who actually thinks that they're ready for prime time for operations, they can bring their ORAN solution into ORCID, and ORCID stands for ORAN Center for Integration and Deployment. And that's what we want to do in that setup. We want to go ahead and actually bring the solution into the ecosystem and validate whether, of course, from security to interoperability to conformance to also performance and real-time KPIs to go out and actually say, how does it perform when it actually is really put into the field? Really stress it out. And what we are providing as part of ORCID is the same network that the same tech stack we actually have in commercial setup. That exact same setup is going to be there. It's not a simulated core. I actually have 30+ network function that I'll be available for ORCID. And I will actually have the same dish tech stack on ORAN that will be available in ORCID. So and we really want to make sure that we actually broaden the ORAN ecosystem so that we are not just relying on one partner. And we want to enable this plug and play. I mean, Sridhar was talking about that earlier on. We want to go ahead and enable that, and that can only happen when we have more ORAN partners into the ecosystem.
That's great. Thank you, Ravinder. Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about Accord?
Sure. So first of all, I would like to apologize in the name of Tracy, because she was supposed to be here, but she couldn't make it. So she's the technical director for Accord. But now I have some big shoes to fill. Yeah. So Accord. Accord stands for the acceleration of compatibility and commercialization of ORAN deployments. Yeah. And what do we try to do there? The scope is to build, it's actually a consortium, formed by the two major operators in the US, so AT&T and Verizon, but also with consulting partners from Reliance and NTT Docomo, and also the North American OTICs. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to build there an Accord lab. But what that means, so the Accord lab will try to enable the testing of performance, of interoperability, of security, and to enable new methods for testing. But the Accord lab is not just a lab. So it's actually consisting of 6 test beds. The main pillar is in the telecom corridor, so to use some buzzwords, in Dallas, in UTD. That will be the main lab. Then we have a satellite in Virginia Tech, in Washington, D.C., and 4 other neutral host facilities. That will be WinLab, Rutgers University, also Iowa State University, Idaho National Labs, and Northeastern University, of course. Thank you. Good. So actually, we had our first meeting in November last year in preparation. And then after the announcement in March, and we had this big tent approach, which we are trying to take. And actually, last week I was in Dallas for our really first technical kickoff, face-to-face. We brought everybody together because being so huge, so 6 test beds, lots of vendors, lots of people involved, it was important to have a first face-to-face interaction just to kickstart all the interactions. So it's nice to see Michele again, and Ian, of course, and Verizon, it was Aloisio, not Verizon, sorry, Virginia Tech, it was Aloisio who represented you. So what we are trying to do in the first year, of course, to ramp up all these test beds and provide connections between them, such that we can then go to different vendor pairings inside, so to test different types of pairings, and to be able also to report the results, and in a consistent manner. And we are already started the discussions with the test vendors for that. So we need to align a little bit the test reports such that we can really compare between all the test beds. And also in the scope of our project is to have then also a reference open source implementation in each of the test beds with components such as the OAI or SRS or Oran Software Community artifacts or Linux Foundation, such that we have like a baseline there of open source, which can then be used for reference and for continuous testing and validation. And of course, being in the universities, it's I think an important point for the workforce development. Yeah, so that's also an important aspect. And yeah, I think I said enough already.
That's great. Thank you, Alex. Ian, you want to give us a quick overview of Valor?
For sure. Thanks, Amanda. So Valor, if you check the dictionary, it's really courage in the midst of battle. So we chose that. I will kind of do a bit of a plug that I actually came up with that acronym, so I'm gonna claim it. Anybody else from VIAVI says they came up with it, they're lying. But anyway, so it stands for VIAVI, Automated Lab as a Service for Open RAN. I think there's several key words there. I mean, being as a service, right? I think one of the key tenets of the NOFO was to improve accessibility, affordability, and availability of test. And we saw that as a barrier, very similar to what Paul was saying. Like there's a lot of smaller companies really could not afford the test gear today. So we figured we wanted to make that available to a broader set of vendors. So we're really targeted to the smaller vendors so that they get access to the lab. It's going to be available as a service, and it's going to be pay as you go. And that payment aspect is more for showing the sustainability of the lab beyond 3 years. So we at VIAVI, we just see it as a new way of consuming tests. And with this government funding, again, similar to this thought of catalyst and lowering the risk, for us, it's a great way to lower the risk of potentially having this new way of offering to customers to access our test equipment. So again, it's a physical lab in Chandler, Arizona, and it'll also be have a very heavy cloud component to it. Wherein people who maybe just wanted to test software can just log on and test their software even remotely without showing up. But if you have an RU or an appliance, you could bring it into Chandler, and we'll have test engineers there to help with the testing and integration, performance, security, interoperability, etc. So we see us as very complementary to the two other awards. Your keywords are really deployment. We also want to do some of that, but more on the pre-deployment. We see pre-certification, pre-badging, supporting vendors to get ready before they go into an OTIC or into DISH or into AT&T, so that they are prepared and ready for that battle. Yeah.
Great, thank you guys. Michele, can you provide us a little bit of background on the Northeastern work you're doing?
Sure. So just to give you a sense, we've been working on ORAN and Open RAN related topics on the research side for a number of years, also with support, for example, from OUSD R&E Future G Office. And when we have the approach that we have in our research is really building and creating systems that truly work. And when doing this, we realize that there are some gaps in when you want to deploy some of these services, some of the software, and there is the testing needs that you were discussing earlier are actually real and existent. So we've been approaching these R&D awards from a perspective which is how can we combine the research expertise that we have with some needs which are more practical, concrete, more immediate in the industry community. And so last spring 2023, we started an OTIC, an Open Testing Integration Center at Northeastern, officially blessed by the Oran Alliance. And we've been thinking at what are the areas in which we can advance the OTIC operations from basically increased innovation in the OTIC. And these are kind of the areas that we identified as part of the R&D awards that we received from NO41. Personally, I'm leading an award that is called Autorun. It is focused on automating the testing for CU and DU. Think of how can we design and deploy an OTIC that is completely automated from the onboarding of the customer, of the vendor, to the execution of the test, and also including the definition of the test themselves. So potentially using some LLM techniques to go from the specification or the test specification into configuration and scripts that can actually drive the overall OTIC automated infrastructure. Actually, on Monday at the OSC workshop, I gave a brief presentation of some of the automation activities that we have been doing. We started Autorun in mid-January, so in this first quarter, we've been primarily focused on creating some of the automation pipelines and automating the first device under test, which is the NVIDIA ARC stack with open air interface. And so that part is now automated. We're working in parallel on creating the other components of the overall picture. The two other efforts, which are led by colleagues at Northeastern, focus on a digital twin system to increase the scope in which you can test the CU and DU, primarily because we have realized that different operational conditions can lead to different test results, especially in the end-to-end performance of the test. And so this project is called DigiRun, is led by my colleague Pedram Johari. And finally, we have Tenoran, which is led by Salvatore Doro. You see, we like all this name with run at the end, so I guess it fits well. And that project is focused on the energy efficiency side of the system, where we want to measure the energy consumption at a very granular level up to identifying which microservices are contributing the most to the energy consumption of the system, profiling the accelerators that we use in Oran system, and developing methodologies that then can be reused by the OTIC and the community in general.
That's great. Thank you very much. Lingjia, can you tell us a little bit about the Virginia Tech effort?
Sure. Thanks. First, thanks, Amanda, for the invitation. Similar to Northeastern University, in fact, Virginia Tech has been invested on looking at ORAN research for quite a few years. And in this first batch, No41, we have several projects. I think we are part of the AT&T forum. And also we have, in terms of research, I think there's a testing method R&D projects, and there are two projects led by Virginia Tech. One is actually led by me, another is led by my colleague Nishish Tripathi. He's working on the security aspect of ORAN. And for me, I'm going to talk about the project I'm leading. The name of the project is called Learning-Based ORAN Testing. So it's actually a collaborative project between Virginia Tech and MIT, where Virginia Tech is leading, serving as a leading institution. So the problem we are looking at is really actually interesting, right? I mean, in the early, I think Sridhar raised a very interesting question, saying that, I mean, how much test is really necessary, is really needed, right? If you look at current ORAN testing, so what happened is that you have actually, you have testing procedures defined for each service. And when you do the testing, and then you have a testing report out of each service. And in that testing report, you have this service-specific KPIs, and also you have actual system KPIs, and also you related it to this kind of the handover. So then each, for example, if you look at a particular example like video streaming, right, you have 17 KPIs for that particular test. And how many services you have? You have more than 150. So you have more than 150 services, and each service is you have, let's say, more than 10 or even close to 20 KPIs. So clearly it's a large number, right? I mean, now it's probably not very scalable if you are going to have more and more service down the road. Then actually, similar to, we raise a question, right? I mean, oh, okay, it seems a lot, and then how many tests are really necessary, right? And also back to what Amanda was mentioning, talk about the minimum variable profile. So we were actually asking ourselves a question that, I mean, are those all kind of KPIs all independent, or they are kind of overlapped, or they are even correlated? Then we take actually a look at it. We found actually many KPIs are overlapping, even within, let's say, from different, let's say, services. But even within same service, those a lot of KPIs are correlated. Then the key question we're asking ourselves, can we actually come up a set of core KPIs where other KPIs are more like a function of those KPIs? Then we can just do the test for those core KPIs. From actually, we are researchers, right? From a research perspective, what we want to see is that, I mean, can we come up a mapping, let's say from a high dimensional, like say temporal, right, temporal space into a relatively low dimensional space where we can do actually efficient testing and even come up new metric in that low dimensional space. So that is actually a problem we're trying to attack. And then the objective, obviously, is that we want to come up an efficient testing procedure with potentially new metric, which can help us to do effective testing. So this is actually a 3-year project. We are going to clearly utilize our own kind of facility because Virginia Techs do have facility, but also we are looking forward to collaborate with all those testing facilities which are made available to us. Thank you very much. And also we are open to collaborate with all kind of industrial and academia on this interesting problem. Thank you.
Yeah, Lingjia, you bring up a really good point. We just have 5 representatives from the awards for NOFO 1. I will mention we made 17 awards, so we've got all of the T&E laboratories represented, but we only have 2 of the R&D efforts represented. So I say that to drive home the need for those larger volume of smaller awards that we have, a need for them to continue to collaborate. And the hope would be that the work you guys are doing would transition or be handed over to VIAVI, to DISH, to AT&T, to be able to be implemented as a resource that they could then test against, right?
Yeah, actually in the auto-run projects, one of the collaborators is AT&T because we're interested in potentially adopting the automation techniques that we're going to develop at the end of the project. So it could play well also with the Accord framework.
Yeah, and actually, the Accord project relies on the test beds because they have different capabilities, let's say. So Virginia Tech has cybersecurity, and also the test beds, ARA and Cosmos and INL have a lot of outdoor testing capabilities, and we rely on each of them for different purposes in this.
And similar to that, I mean, as to Accord, I mean, with ORCID as well, what we're trying to do is ORCID setup, we want to run it as a test factory. What we want to make sure is that all the automation and the AI work that actually is happening, when it comes to just spin it up, that it's operationally ready. Because, standard-based ecosystem, which telco is, you can define as to what the result you're expecting. And if we can coherently use the LLM models to coherently automate the testing, orchestration, but also the analysis, that's what we want to coherently get into our factory-based system for ORCID. So as you guys coherently develop that, it will be a great platform for us to get benefit by that.
Yep. Yeah, and I think same obviously for Valor. I think there's a couple items, definitely on the automation, using AI ML. It's a key tenet of our proposal, right? As we mentioned, it's a 3-year period of performance, and we do have a kind of the fees that are really affordable for the smaller vendors, and we need to use these 3 years to make it cost effective enough that we could sustain that level of pricing for the smaller vendors out there, right? Because the last thing we want is after 3 years everything goes to waste, right? So I think leveraging the innovations, putting it into Valor, and the other thing too I forgot to mention is we have a tiered pricing model, and we actually mentioned in our proposal that academic research can use the test bed for free, as long as it's not being used, right? So unused capacity from vendors can be leveraged by academics. So as soon as you come up with your software, your ideas, you're welcome to just try it out in Valor.
So pulling on that a little bit, how would somebody sitting in the audience or a company that has something they'd like to go test and validate, how would they approach one of the laboratories to enable that to happen? And at the same time, are you three cross-pollinating to ensure that if somebody comes to Valor and then go to Accord, we're getting similar results?
Yeah, maybe I could take a little bit of that. I mean, obviously, the Valor information is already on the VIAVI website. There is a mailing list. Currently, it goes to me, and a few others in VIAVI. But yeah, I think everybody here is welcome to start, engaging. We want to engage with as many vendors, customers as possible, because that fulfills our mission. And also on the collaboration front, right? We are collaborating very closely with Accord. I was there in the workshop where we have to figure out how to do that transition, let's say, for a smaller vendor in our lab to kind of go into yours, and obviously with ORCID as well. So yeah, that's definitely, I would say we're still working out the exact mechanics of how to do that. And thanks to the NTIA, was really facilitating a lot of those questions, right, on how do we make sure that, again, we're not repeating, we're not conflicting, because ultimately we want to be good stewards of taxpayer money. Yeah.
So just carrying on to that, the thought process for ORCID was that we want to go ahead and actually give, back to the point of factory-based model, for anybody to go and actually use ORCID, we will be launching an ORCID webpage. So it'll be a portal that you come in, you sign off, you actually have to go through a checklist. We will go ahead and actually make sure that the testing is actually unbiased. And we will go ahead and, of course, publish the results as well onto that portal as well. And given that it's funded by the grant, and also we have invested, Dish has invested into this ecosystem as well. But for the period of 5 years when we are live, we would go ahead and actually offer the service for the testing, both in our lab and also into the field, free of cost as well. But let's say if there is advanced testing that needs to actually happen from resilience standpoint, or if you need some consulting, there will be some charge. Because at the end of the day, after 5 years, we want to make sure that ORCID is sustainable. And the way that we are trying to collaborate with others as well as ORCID, we think, and that's how we have envisioned, is that ORCID is a last stop to go ahead and actually say that you are operationally ready, or the solution is operationally ready. So when you are saying, when an OEM believes that they are ready with their ORAN solution, they go out to ORCID, log in, create your account, you submit that, and based on the reports, we'll tell you, based on the lab and field testing, as to where you stand in terms of, as I mentioned, security, interoperability, conformance, and actually KPI into the field as well. And we'll make sure we go ahead and actually share those inputs to you.
Yeah, so I agree with Ian. So we have a common goal, to lower the barriers for vendors to come into the lab, and of course they are welcome to contact us for that. But also we are in discussions to expand to even more testbeds, so other labs to join us and be part of that, and be able to sustain more and more vendors coming in and doing such tests.
And one other thing on Accord itself, we are collaborating with UTD as well to go ahead and actually support the input from Accord into ORCID as well. So it's in very early stage, but that's where we are.
Great. Well, thank you guys very much for coming today and providing some overview of the laboratories and the research and development efforts underway. So I'm hopeful that the labs get a ton of use, and that the R&D projects are fruitful and able to be a resource and help build much of what we're talking about today in terms of the open source community, and help drive automating some of this testing for the Open RAN ecosystem. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to your continued success.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks, everybody.